Here they are on our stage, John Paul, George, and Ringo. I Want to Hold Your Hand, A Hard Day's Night, Ticket to Ride, and ladies and gentlemen, 800 million physical and digital albums later, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, 1988, 7 Grammys, and Academy Award, and guess what's left? Rick Granati, ladies and gentlemen, the fifth Beatle. Watching them on Ed Sullivan the very first time, you and your brothers, we talk about it all the time. Maybe the real reason why we now have the Granati brothers, who will be playing here at the Beaver train station to celebrate their 50th anniversary of the Beaver Area Heritage Foundation Saturday, right?
Absolutely. It's going to be a great, great event.
And music, memorabilia, and cars from the 1967 year that created the Mercury Cougar. It created the Ford LTD. It created the Mustang, and yes, from the Stingray in '66 to the ever-loving Corvette fans, and they all know the 1967 brand. It was a very special year, and it was all GM, General Motors, American-made cars, Ford and Chevy. We absolutely loved that year. And earlier today, in a blog that I did, just to kind of share some of these little tidbits, such artists as the Box Tops, Bobby Gentry, the Association, the Monkees, the Doors, Frank and Nancy Sinatra actually had a top 10 hit in 1967, Something Stupid. I've heard that a few times. Also, the Turtles, Happy Together, so they tell me. And the Young Rascals, Groovin', and Frankie Valli, the young man out of New Jersey, said, "You're going to work till we tell you you can't work anymore." And of course, that song was Can't Take My Eye Off You. But it was the Beatles, and it was the Rolling Stones. This is what I want to talk to you about the Rolling Stones about. They were formed in 1962. Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Charlie Watts, Brian Jones, Ian Stewart, and of course, Mr. Watt. Jones left before a month before his death, and then Mick Taylor jumped in, and then Ronnie Woods took over in 1975. Bill Wyman left in '98. Darryl Jones entered. A lot of different people, even the great late Billy Preston actually played keyboards with them for a time. The Tammy Show, following James Brown, the Famous Flames, that's where that rooster strut, that dance style that Mick Jagger was famous for. The Ed Sullivan Show in October of that year. But this is what I want you to tell me. Is it fact or fiction in your opinion? They say from 1968 to 72, that was the golden era of the Rolling Stones. How can you say that when they went on to have the Voodoo Lounge tour that grossed $320 million? They were in Israel in 2014. They're still making incredible music, and they're touring the world and selling out venues that seat hundreds of thousands of people. So I think the Stones have been gold just about ever since they came to this country.
Yeah, you're hitting on a very key note here. My friend Peter Bennett, who you met when you had him on the radio, he brought Rolling Stones and the British invasion over, and eventually he ran Apple Records and saved the Beatles' career. While he was in the picture with the Rolling Stones, they always had #1 songs. They never had #1 songs after that.
No kidding, Rick.
Yep. So they could still get up the charts and still pack arenas. But the Beatles had Peter Bennett because he could take the song, get it on the radio, get it into the hot rotation, get it to #1 in Billboard, get it marketed everywhere. The key to success. Getting someone there is the magic. Staying there, supernatural.
1967, Bonnie and Clyde, which by the way, Turner Classic Movie is going to re-release in selected theaters coming up, celebrate its 50th. Paul Newman, Cool Hand Luke. But it was also a time for some major headlines. 475,000 troops in Vietnam. Muhammad Ali stripped of his title. 7,000 National Guard called in the Detroit riots. People like Twiggy making headlines, Sgt. Pepper, Jefferson Starship, Grateful Dead, and the Byrds. So a special time, but it was also a time for you to mold your talent. Your brothers, Hermie and David, just a very small young man at that time, a boy learning to play the guitar. Tony Bonomo gets in the mix. We talked about people like B.E. Taylor from this area, Donnie Iris, the Jaggers. I mean, there's so much talent. So when you come here, going back to the 60s on Saturday, also going to be great food here as well, too. Few tickets left, going to be a sellout. What do you remember about those early, that raw period in your career?
After seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, everybody wanted to do that. So we were just starting to perfect the techniques. The Jaggers had a #1 song in the 70s. That inspired everybody that you could do it from this area. But everybody wanted to be like the Beatles and have a lot of girls screaming for them. God didn't hear my prayer at me, not for me. But we wanted to be the Beatles. That looked like it was fun, like it was easy. It's one of the roughest businesses in the world.
But you're so good at what you do still.
But what the Beatles did in that short period of time wasn't even 10 or 12 years actually from them. What they were able to do in that short period of time, nobody will ever duplicate.
This is what I want to ask. You would have kept touring, stayed together. As big as anybody or bigger? Did they have that kind of staying power? I can't imagine Paul McCartney doing Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger's a showman. Not to say McCartney's not, but would they have the same ability, you think, the Staying Stones?
If they would have got back together, which they were planning to do,
Right.
and then it was just like a little glitch, and biggest regret for Paul and Ringo and everybody, that it didn't come. If they would have got back together, the show that they were going to do was going to be $30 million, one show. So can you imagine?
Tough work if you can get it.
If they would have went out and did.
All right, what can I say, folks? They would have been everything, and I mean everything, when it comes to if they would have stayed around. Well, they didn't, but guess what? The Granati brothers have, from the Granati brothers to G-Force, and the brothers as a Granati family once again will take the stage this coming Saturday at 6:30 here, helping the Beaver Area Heritage Foundation celebrate their 50th year. And don't forget, you can't get Motown, Temptations, Four Tops, Diana Ross, The Supremes, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, Jackson 5, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, a little dancing in the streets, Mary Wells, Tammy Terrell, Marvin Gaye, great stuff. Racial integration, I listened to it from the time I was a very small child. It really opened my eyes up and my life up to the rest of the world. You cannot say enough about Motown. 79 records in the top 10 and Billboard's top 100, 60 to 69. They survived the Detroit riots, also happening in 1967. The loss of Holland Dozier, Holland. And they moved to LA and got involved in film. Diana Ross, Lady Sings the Blues. What can I say? Thank you, Barry Gordy. You two, a major part of not just my life, but many others, as they salute 1967. Oh, what a year it was. Good night from the Beaver train station from your Pratte Pack.